It is November. Wow! It's hard to believe that it's already this month. It seems I just started my internship like yesterday. But I tell you, we had to submit my 3-month evaluation. So it's November, okay? And November, it's a special month for me. And I tell you that in Hungary, this is the time of the year when actually the weather gets cold and dark and rainy. So I don't like November because of that. Here in the US, at least you have Thanksgiving Day to gather together and have some fun with family and friends. But also, we have some joyous remembrance that we can do in the day of November. For example, today is All Saints Sunday. And as you look around in your pew, you can see a saint. Each and every pew has one. So today you are sitting with saints. I invite you to learn your saints or visit also the other pews here and learn about them. And I have a special saint that I want to talk to you about. It is Saint Martin. Which one of you have Saint Martin in your pews? Oh wow, Sharon has it. Good, very good. So do you know who was Saint Martin? He lived actually in the 4th century at the region that later became Hungary. He served as a soldier in the Roman army, and he had a pretty profound conversion experience when he was 18 years old. He became a monk and ultimately a bishop in a city that they call Tours, and now it's in modern-day France. You may be familiar with the story of Saint Martin and the beggar. In this legend, Saint Martin rides on his horse. He's a soldier. He's riding his horse, and it's November and very cold. And he meets with a poor beggar, and he decides to cut his cloak in half and give half of his cloak to this man. And on the very same night when he goes to sleep, he dreams that in his dream Jesus appears to him. But Jesus is wearing that half of the cloak that he gave to the beggar earlier that day. He hears that Jesus is speaking to the angel, saying, "Here is Martin, the Roman soldier who has not been baptized, yet he clothed me." So that was Martin's conversion experience. This was enough for him to get baptized and quit being a soldier. He became a monk. And it just makes sense that we commemorate him and his life on November. In fact, November the 11th, which is also Veterans Day, when we remember our soldiers. But I'm not done why I think November is a special month yet. November is a birth month of Martin Luther. He was born in 1483. And according to the custom of that time, he got baptized immediately. This is how he got the name Martin. And I am not just telling these stories to entertain you. I can connect it with the gospel. Today's gospel was often called as the widow's mite. And people often say this is a story about victims. Since widows were particularly vulnerable members of the society of Jesus' time. Remind you, according to the old Judean law, women were not allowed to have property or conduct business. So they could not make essential decisions for themselves. They needed special protection, guardianship from their husbands or their families. And if they were not married because their husband deceased, the temple scribes usually took over and they sold the inheritance of the man, of their husbands. And, some of these scribes actually were really tempted to take advantage of the situation and devoured the widows' houses, as it is beautifully written in the gospel for today. To be a widow at that time, when Jesus lived, almost automatically meant to be poor. Interestingly enough, I don't really see that many things changed in our society today. So here, Jesus speaks up against the exploiting system of the temple, especially since the Mosaic law commends the protection of the widows and orphans. So we have a double message here today in the gospel. One is about right and righteousness, but there is also about the devotion from the depth of the heart, which the widow demonstrates when she puts 2 coins, her penny, into the offering box. Jesus makes it very clear. These coins are the all thing that she has to live on. And she entrusts everything to God. Now, just like Saint Martin, she could only have given half of those coins, just 1 coin, and go and get some bread for herself on the other. But her devotion is absolute. There is no compromise. Mark underlines the gap between the wealthy person's offering and the widow's gift of her whole livelihood. The large amounts contributed to by the wealthy probably is more visible for, when they are counting together the money. But Jesus summons his disciples and points out the widow's offering, the 2 small copper coins. Whereas the widow gives her whole livelihood, the wealthy give from their surplus. Thus, the great amounts that gain them honor as benefactors are nothing compared with the offering made by the widow. Some interpreters, in fact, point out that the exemplary character of the widow's offering lies in her willingness to give everything to God, unlike the rich man, who would not give up his wealth to become a disciple. The widow is the one who really belongs to the kingdom. But praise for the widow does not imply that Jesus approves of the social conditions that have created her poverty. The condemnation of the scribes whose taste for wealth is linked to devouring the houses of the widows must not be forgotten when we read this passage. It suggests that Jesus is kind of attacking both the scribes and the religious system that allows this form of exploitation. Since God would not demand such sacrifices from the poor of the world. So Jesus has already told his disciples that persons must be willing to renounce their own desires, to go out and take up their cross and become servants for all in order to follow him. The widow's story can be read as an anticipation of Jesus' own sacrifice of his life. So for me, November is a month of devotion, no matter what we commemorate of. And yes, veterans gave everything for the service of their land. They risked their lives and often suffered physical and mental wounds that affect their health and relationships. That is an absolute devotion. There is no compromise there. And Saint Martin, yes, he may have kept initially half of his cloak, but soon after that he gives all his life to Jesus Christ. He is giving up his worldly fame, military career, and worldly joys, and dedicating his entire life to God. That is an absolute devotion without compromise. In 1483, an infant was baptized named Martin. And like every person to be baptized, this child and his life was entrusted entirely to the grace of God. Our devotion in baptism is also absolute. There is no compromise. This day, maybe this week, or the whole entire month, I invite you to ponder on devotion and our own devotion as well. As I mentioned you earlier, through baptism, we were entrusted entirely to God and God's grace. On Confirmation Day, we confirm this devotion to God's grace and the promise to God's church. So today, let's not only remember the devotion of others, but also our devotion to God and God's holy church. And think about it. What does this mean to me? Are you ready to devote yourself fully, or are you just giving your surplus? How can I testify my devotion? How can I show that I am fully embraced by God's love and grace? And how can I be an instrument to pass this love and grace? How do we live our faith with all of our hearts and souls? So theologians have said about today's gospel that the poor widow is not just an example of Christian faith and life. In the faith of the widow, we see the fate of Jesus foretold. Betrayed by the temple authorities, and yet give his everything. Jesus obeyed the Father and died on the cross for us all creatures. His devotion was absolute. There is no compromise. So let us today remember all those who gave themselves and give themselves completely. And let us thank and praise Christ, who gave himself completely for our sake and for the sake of all creatures. Amen.